Welcome, weary undead, to a journey through the deepest mysteries of Lordran and beyond. Tonight, we explore not just the established lore of Dark Souls, but the fascinating theories that fans have woven from fragments of item descriptions, environmental storytelling, and whispered implications. These are the stories between the stories, the connections that may exist in shadow and speculation. So rest your bones by this bonfire, let your mind drift like ash on the wind, and together we'll delve into the beautiful uncertainties that make this world so endlessly captivating. Close your eyes when you're ready, and let the theories unfold. In the beginning, when the world was unformed and shrouded in fog, ancient dragons ruled over a realm of grey crags and arch trees that stretched beyond mortal comprehension. It was a time before time, an age without differentiation, where existence itself was little more than potential waiting to be awakened. Then came the first flame, that miraculous spark that would reshape reality itself and give birth to the concepts of light and dark, heat and cold, life and death. From this primordial fire emerged four beings of incredible power, each claiming a Lord Soul that would define their nature and their destiny. Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, seized the soul that blazed with the power of lightning and divine authority. The Witch of Izalith claimed the soul of life itself, becoming mother to the flames of creation and destruction alike. Nito, first of the dead, embraced the soul of death and disease, becoming the shepherd of all who would ever draw their final breath. But there was a fourth soul, one that the official histories speak of only in whispers and half-remembered fragments. This was the Dark Soul, and the being who claimed it has come to be known simply as the Pygmy, described in the most ancient texts with a single haunting word: furtive. This choice of language has spawned countless theories among scholars and seekers of truth, for why would such a momentous figure be described not by name or deed, but by a quality that suggests secrecy, stealth, and intentional obscurity? The most compelling theory that has emerged from decades of careful analysis suggests that the Pygmy was not a single being at all, but rather multiple entities who together claimed and divided the Dark Soul among themselves. This would explain why humanity itself carries fragments of this soul within each individual, why the Dark Soul seems naturally fragmented rather than concentrated in a single vessel like the other Lord Souls. Consider the evidence that supports this revolutionary interpretation of the creation myth. Throughout the Dark Souls series, we encounter references to humanity that suggest not a single origin point but multiple sources of the same essential power. The Ringed City, that ancient settlement at the world's end, contains architectural and cultural elements that speak of diverse civilizations, all sharing the same fundamental connection to the Dark Soul. The environmental storytelling within the Ringed City provides perhaps the strongest support for this theory. The structures we find there are not uniform in design or construction, suggesting that they were built by different peoples at different times, yet all share the same underlying connection to the power of darkness. The Pygmy Lords we encounter in this realm each possess fragments of the Dark Soul, but their individual personalities and approaches to wielding this power differ dramatically, as if they were never meant to be unified under a single consciousness or will. If we accept this interpretation, then the word furtive takes on new meaning entirely. Rather than describing the character of a single individual, it describes the deliberate choice made by these multiple Pygmy Lords to remain hidden, to work in shadow rather than claiming the same kind of obvious dominion that Gwyn and the other Lord Soul Wielders pursued. They understood, perhaps instinctively, that the Dark Soul was different from its counterparts, that it thrived not through dominance, but through distribution, not through concentration, but through sharing. This furtive nature may have been a strategic decision born from wisdom rather than fear. The Pygmy Lords could have observed how Gwyn's pursuit of eternal light led to stagnation and decay, how the Witch of Izalith's attempts to recreate the first flame resulted in the birth of demons and chaos. They may have chosen obscurity as a form of protection, not just for themselves, but for the power they carried and the humanity that would spring from their essence. The implications of this theory extend far beyond simple historical revision. If the Dark Soul was always meant to be divided, if humanity itself represents the intended expression of this power rather than a diminished echo of some greater original, then the entire cycle of fire and dark takes on new meaning. The linking of the fire becomes not a noble sacrifice, but a fundamental violation of the natural order, an attempt to force unity where diversity was always the intended state. Consider how this perspective reframes our understanding of the undead curse. Rather than being a punishment inflicted upon humanity for some forgotten transgression, the curse begins to look like a natural response to an unnatural situation. When Gwyn linked the fire and extended the age of fire beyond its natural lifespan, he created a world where the Dark Soul's fragmentary nature became a weakness rather than a strength, where humanity's distributed power became a source of instability rather than resilience. The curse manifests when individuals begin to lose their connection to their fragment of the Dark Soul, becoming hollow as their essential humanity drains away. But what if this process represents not decay, but preparation? What if hollowing is the Dark Soul's way of preparing its vessels for reunification, creating empty containers that can be filled with pure darkness when the Age of Fire finally ends and the natural order reasserts itself? This interpretation finds support in the behavior of hollow enemies throughout the series. Rather than being mindless monsters driven only by hunger and aggression, many hollows display behaviors that suggest they are waiting for something, following patterns that speak of purpose rather than mere instinct. They gather around sources of humanity. They protect areas that hold significance to the Dark Soul's power, and they seem to recognize on some level when they encounter beings who still carry strong connections to their own humanity. The Pygmy Lord's furtive nature also explains why so little concrete information about them exists in the world's historical records. Unlike Gwyn, who built a pantheon of gods and established Anor Londo as a monument to his glory, or the Witch of Izalith, whose attempts to recreate the first flame left permanent scars on the world's geography, the Pygmy Lords worked through influence rather than direct action, through inspiration rather than command. They seeded the world with humanity, and then stepped back, allowing their creations to develop naturally rather than trying to control or direct them. This hands-off approach meant that when later historians, particularly those working under Gwyn's influence, attempted to record the events of the Ancient Age, they found little direct evidence of Pygmy activity to document. The deliberate obscurity becomes even more poignant when we consider what it cost them. By choosing to remain hidden, to work through others, rather than claiming credit for their contributions, the Pygmy Lords effectively erased themselves from the world's memory. They became the forgotten gods, the unacknowledged creators of humanity's greatest strengths and deepest mysteries. Yet perhaps this sacrifice was intentional, a final gift to the humans who would carry their legacy forward. By removing themselves from the equation, they ensured that humanity would develop its own identity, its own culture, its own understanding of what it meant to wield the power of the Dark Soul. They became ancestors rather than rulers, influences rather than authorities. This theory also provides a more satisfying explanation for why the Dark Soul behaves so differently from the other Lord Souls throughout the series. While Gwyn's Soul of Light maintains its essential character, even when fragmented among his children and followers, and while Nito's dominion over death remains absolute and unchanging, the Dark Soul seems to evolve and adapt based on the individuals who carry it. Each human being shapes their fragment of the Dark Soul through their choices, their experiences, their understanding of what it means to be human. The soul responds to love, to courage, to sacrifice, to wisdom, to all the qualities that make humanity more than just another race of creatures in a world filled with gods and monsters. This adaptability, this responsiveness to individual growth and development, suggests that the Dark Soul was always meant to be a collaborative power rather than an authoritarian one. The environmental storytelling throughout the series supports this interpretation in subtle but consistent ways. Areas associated with humanity and the Dark Soul tend to be organic in their development, growing naturally from the landscape rather than being imposed upon it. Human settlements follow the contours of the land, incorporate natural features into their design, and show evidence of gradual development over long periods of time. This stands in stark contrast to the grand architectural projects associated with the other Lord Soul wielders. Anor Londo's impossible spires and perfect symmetries speak of divine will imposing order on chaos, while the demon ruins show the results of power applied without sufficient wisdom or restraint. Human architecture, by contrast, suggests cooperation between multiple individuals working toward common goals, adaptation to changing circumstances, and respect for the natural world that sustains all life. Even the way humanity interacts with the undead curse reflects this collaborative approach to power. Rather than seeking individual transcendence or attempting to dominate the curse through raw strength, human communities develop support systems that help their members maintain their humanity through mutual aid and shared purpose. The most successful human settlements in the Dark Souls world are those that prioritize community bonds over individual achievement, cooperation over competition. The Pygmy Lord's legacy lives on in these small acts of kindness and mutual support that characterize human civilization at its best. Their furtive nature becomes not a weakness but a teaching, a demonstration that true power lies not in being seen and acknowledged, but in creating conditions where others can flourish and grow. As you settle deeper into contemplation of these mysteries, consider how the Pygmy Lord's choice to remain hidden reflects a wisdom that transcends the immediate concerns of power and recognition. They understood that some gifts are best given anonymously, that some influences are most effective when their source remains unknown. Their furtive nature becomes a meditation on the beauty of selfless contribution, the quiet satisfaction that comes from helping others without needing credit or acknowledgement. The Dark Soul they shared with humanity carries within it this same spirit of generous anonymity. It empowers without enslaving, it strengthens without binding, it gifts without creating debt. In the gentle darkness that exists between sleeping and waking, between memory and dream, we can sense the presence of these forgotten benefactors, the Pygmy Lords who gave us the capacity for growth, for love, for the endless becoming that defines the human experience. Rest now in the knowledge that you carry within yourself a fragment of their gift, a piece of the Dark Soul that connects you not only to every other human being, but to the wise and furtive lords who chose love over glory, service over dominion, the quiet satisfaction of creation over the loud acclaim of conquest. In the land of Astora, where sunlight once blessed golden fields and noble knights upheld ancient codes of honor, there came a warrior whose very presence seemed to carry within it the warmth of summer mornings and the hope of dawn breaking over distant horizons. Solaire of Astora walked the cursed lands with a purpose that transcended the mere survival that drove most undead. His every step guided by a quest that spoke to something deeper than duty or ambition. His greeting to fellow travelers carried the infectious enthusiasm of someone who had found meaning in a world gone mad with despair and darkness. "Praise the sun," he would declare, his voice carrying genuine joy, even in the most desolate circumstances. His arms raised toward whatever light he could find in skies grown dim with ash and sorrow. To those who encountered him, Solaire represented something precious and increasingly rare, unwavering optimism in the face of seemingly impossible odds. Yet beneath this cheerful exterior lay mysteries that have captivated scholars and theorists for generations. How could a simple knight of Astora wield miracles that belonged properly to the gods themselves? Why did his lightning spears crackle with the same divine energy that had once been the exclusive province of Gwyn and his children? What drove this seemingly mortal warrior to seek his own son with such desperate intensity that he would risk madness itself in pursuit of his dream? The most compelling theory that has emerged from careful analysis of Solaire's abilities and motivations suggests that he is far more than he appears to be, that his humble presentation as a knight of Astora masks a divine heritage that even he himself may not fully understand. According to this interpretation, Solaire is actually one of Gwyn's sons, either cast out from Aenor Londo for reasons lost to history, or perhaps forgotten entirely in the chaos that followed the Lord of Sunlight's decision to link the first flame. Consider the evidence that supports this remarkable possibility. Solaire's mastery of lightning miracles goes far beyond what any mortal warrior should be able to achieve, no matter how dedicated their training or pure their faith. The lightning spear miracle that he can teach to worthy students requires not just belief, but an actual connection to the divine power that Gwyn once wielded. Such connections are not learned through study or granted through prayer alone. They must flow from some deeper source, some inherent link to the power that created these miracles in the first place. His obsession with finding his own son takes on new meaning when viewed through this lens. Rather than being the simple delusion of a mad knight, this quest becomes the unconscious seeking of a divine son for reunion with his father's essence. Gwyn's sacrifice to link the first flame scattered his soul across multiple vessels, creating the Lords of Cinder while leaving fragments of his divine nature distributed among his children and followers. If Solaire is indeed one of these lost children, then his search for his own son represents an instinctive attempt to reclaim his birthright, to find the piece of his father's soul that belongs to him by divine right. The tragedy of his quest lies not in its futility, but in its misunderstanding. He seeks external validation of an internal truth, looking for his son in the wrong places when it already burns within his own divine heart. The timeline of events supports this theory in subtle but significant ways. Solaire appears in locations throughout Lordran, at moments that suggest he possesses knowledge or intuition beyond what a simple knight should have access to. His presence at key moments in the chosen undead's journey seems too convenient to be mere coincidence, too perfectly timed to be the result of random wandering. This prescient knowledge makes more sense if we consider that he carries within himself fragments of divine awareness, inherited memories that guide his steps even when his conscious mind cannot interpret their meaning. Like a sleepwalker following paths laid down in dreams, Solaire moves through the world guided by impulses that spring from sources deeper than conscious thought. Environmental storytelling provides additional clues that support his divine parentage. The statue of a knight in prayer that can be found in various locations throughout the game bears a striking resemblance to Solaire's distinctive armor and pose. These statues appear in contexts that suggest they commemorate someone of great importance, yet no historical records identify their subject. This absence from official histories mirrors the mysterious gaps surrounding Solaire's own origins, and suggests that both the knight and the statues he resembles have been deliberately forgotten or obscured. The equipment that Solaire carries tells its own story for those who know how to read such signs. His armor, while appearing humble and well-worn, displays craftsmanship that speaks of divine origin. The sun symbol emblazoned across his chest is not merely decorative but functions as a focus for his miraculous powers, channeling and amplifying his connection to solar energies in ways that mortal-crafted items should not be able to achieve. His sword, too, carries traces of divine blessing that become more apparent when examined through the lens of possible divine heritage. The weapon responds to his touch in ways that suggest recognition, as if it remembers being wielded by hands that carry the blood of gods. When Solaire channels his lightning miracles through the blade, it sings with harmonies that echo the music of creation itself. Alternative interpretations of the evidence suggest that Solaire might not be Gwyn's son in the traditional sense, but rather a fragment of Gwyn's own soul that achieved independent existence through some cosmic accident or divine intervention. This theory explains his abilities while accounting for the strange gaps in his memory and the seemingly unconscious nature of his quest. If Solaire represents a piece of Gwyn's consciousness that was separated during the linking of the first flame, then his search for his own son becomes a poignant attempt at self-integration, a fragment seeking reunion with the whole from which it was torn. His cheerful demeanor masks a profound sense of incompleteness, a soul that knows itself to be part of something greater, but cannot quite grasp what that something might be. This interpretation adds layers of tragedy to his eventual fate in the demon ruins, where the sunlight maggot offers him a false sun that satisfies his desperate need for solar connection while driving him to madness. The maggot feeds on his divine essence, using his inherited connection to light as a source of power while poisoning his mind with illusions of fulfillment. The irony becomes almost unbearable when we realize that Solaire's true son was always within him, that the divine light he sought in external sources burned steadily in his own heart throughout his entire quest. His tragedy lies not in his failure to find what he was looking for, but in his inability to recognize that he had never actually lost it. Yet there is beauty in this misguided search as well, a nobility in the quest itself that transcends its ultimate futility. Solaire's unwavering optimism, his generous spirit, his willingness to help fellow travelers without expectation of reward, all of these qualities shine with the same divine light he seeks in the sky above. He embodies the very thing he searches for, becoming a sun for others even while believing himself to be still in darkness. The co-op mechanics surrounding Solaire's character provide their own form of evidence for his divine nature. His ability to manifest as a phantom ally transcends the normal rules that govern undead cooperation, suggesting that his essence operates on a higher plane than ordinary cursed beings. When he appears to aid fellow travelers, he brings with him not just martial skill but actual hope, his presence capable of turning desperate struggles into triumphant victories. This power to inspire and uplift others speaks to divine heritage in ways that go beyond mere combat prowess. Throughout mythology and legend, the children of gods are distinguished not just by their supernatural abilities, but by their capacity to elevate those around them, to kindle greatness in others through their own example and encouragement. Solaire's teaching of the praise the sun gesture becomes, in this context, not just a jovial tradition but a form of divine blessing, a way of sharing his internal light with others who have forgotten that they too carry sparks of the divine within themselves. When travelers learn this gesture from him and use it to celebrate their own victories, they participate in a ritual that connects them to the same source of power that flows through Solaire's divine essence. The locations where Solaire chooses to rest and contemplate reveal his unconscious connection to places of power and significance. He is drawn to areas where the veil between mortal and divine grows thin, where echoes of the ancient age still resonate with sufficient strength to nourish his inherited memories. His bonfire conversations often touch on themes of purpose and belonging that suggest a soul grappling with identity on levels deeper than conscious awareness. His philosophical musings about cooperation and mutual aid reflect divine wisdom filtered through mortal experience. When he speaks of the importance of helping fellow travelers, he articulates principles that echo the cosmic laws governing divine behavior. Gods, in their truest form, exist to serve creation rather than to dominate it, and Solaire's generous spirit reflects this understanding even when he cannot consciously access its source. The weather seems to respond to Solaire's emotional states in subtle ways that further support theories of his divine nature. Observant players have noted that areas where he can be found often experience slightly brighter ambient lighting, as if his presence literally brings illumination to the world around him. This effect becomes more pronounced when he is in good spirits and dims noticeably during periods when his quest weighs heavily on his mind. His dreams, when he speaks of them, contain imagery that suggests inherited memories of Anor Londo in its glory days. Visions of a golden city where sunlight flowed like water and divine beings walked among mortals as teachers and protectors. These dreams fuel his conviction that somewhere in the world, his own son waits to be discovered, not understanding that they represent memories of a heritage he cannot consciously access. The timing of Solaire's various appearances throughout the chosen undead's journey suggests that he is following patterns laid down by forces beyond conscious planning. He arrives at crucial moments not through coincidence, but because something within him recognizes the cosmic significance of these encounters. His divine essence responds to the call of destiny, even when his mortal mind cannot interpret the signals he receives. In the end, whether Solaire is Gwyn's forgotten son or a fragment of the Lord, of Sunlight's own soul, matters less than what his story teaches us about the nature of divine inheritance and the tragedy of forgotten identity. His cheerful quest for his own son becomes a meditation on how we all seek outside ourselves for qualities and powers that already reside within our own hearts. The gentle sadness of his story lies in its universality. How many of us spend our lives seeking validation, achievement, or recognition that we believe will finally make us whole, never realizing that we already possess everything we truly need? Solaire's divine nature shines most brightly not in his miraculous abilities but in his capacity for joy, hope, and selfless service to others. As you rest in contemplation of this noble warrior's journey, let his example remind you that the light you seek in the world around you already burns steadily within your own spirit. His praise of the sun becomes an invitation to recognize and celebrate the divine spark that illuminates your own existence, the inner radiance that no darkness can ever truly extinguish. The sun that Solaire seeks exists not in the sky above, but in the warmth of friendship offered freely, in the hope shared with fellow travelers, in the generous spirit that puts others' needs before its own selfish desires. In this understanding, his quest transforms from tragedy to triumph, from failure to the most profound kind of success. Beyond the great cathedral of Anor Londo, past the archives where countless volumes chronicle the rise and fall of gods, there exists a doorway that opens not onto another chamber, but onto an entirely different realm of existence. This threshold leads to the painted world of Ariamis, a place that operates according to laws so fundamentally different from those governing ordinary reality that merely crossing its boundary transforms visitors into something other than what they were before. The painting itself, housed in a chamber where dust motes dance like captured souls in shafts of pale light, appears deceptively simple to casual observation. Canvas and pigment, frame and varnish materials that any artist might employ in their work. Yet something in the way these ordinary components have been combined creates a gateway that defies every assumption about the nature of space, time, and existence itself. To enter this painted realm is to step outside the cycle of fire and dark that has governed the world since the age of dragons ended and the age of gods began. Here, in this space that exists between reality and imagination, the fundamental laws that bind souls to their appointed destinies lose their grip. The undead curse that drives hollow warriors to madness finds no purchase in this sanctuary, while the linking of the fire that sustains the age of gods has no influence over the painted world's internal chronology. The most compelling theory that has emerged from decades of careful analysis suggests that painted worlds were deliberately created as escape routes from the endless cycle that traps the primary universe in its pattern of flame and compelling theory, fading, light and dark. These realms exist as refuges where souls weary of the constant struggle between opposing forces can find peace in a reality governed by different principles entirely. Consider the evidence that supports this remarkable interpretation. The painted world of Ariamis contains creatures and beings that clearly originated in the primary world yet have found new forms of existence within the painted realm's boundaries. The phalanx demons that once served the old one have taken up residence here, their multiple souls finding harmony in ways that the primary world's emphasis on individual identity would never have allowed. The engorged hollows that populate certain areas of the painted world display behaviors that suggest they have moved beyond the mindless hunger that characterizes their counterparts in Lordran. These beings retain enough of their original personalities to engage in complex activities like crafting and construction, yet they show no signs of the desperation that typically drives hollow behavior in the cursed lands. Most significantly, the painted world contains Priscilla, a being whose very existence challenges the fundamental assumptions about the nature of life and divinity in the Dark Souls universe. Born from the union of a dragon and a god, she represents something that should not be possible according to the rigid categories that define the primary world's reality. Yet here, in this painted sanctuary, she thrives as the guardian and protector of all who seek refuge from the conflicts that rage beyond the canvas. The environmental storytelling within Ariamis reveals a society built around principles of acceptance and peaceful coexistence rather than the competition and conflict that characterize the primary world. The architecture flows organically from the landscape, suggesting growth rather than imposition, development rather than conquest. Buildings show evidence of cooperative construction, with different sections clearly built by different types of beings working toward common goals. The snow that falls eternally throughout the painted world serves as more than mere atmospheric decoration. This gentle precipitation represents the realm's rejection of the harsh extremes that define existence in the primary universe, where Lordran swings between the burning intensity of the Age of Fire and the consuming darkness that threatens to follow. The painted world maintains a constant state of gentle twilight, neither hot nor cold, neither blazingly bright nor utterly dark. This eternal snow also symbolizes the painted world's relationship to time itself. Each flake that falls is unique, yet all are made of the same essential substance. They accumulate without reaching any final state, neither melting away completely nor building to overwhelming depths. This represents a form of temporal existence that moves forward without demanding progress toward any particular destination. Change without the violent transitions that characterize the primary world's history. The mechanics by which painted worlds are created provide additional insight into their purpose as escape routes from the cycle of fire and dark. The process requires not just artistic skill but actual sacrifice, with painters literally investing pieces of their own souls into their work. This personal investment creates a sympathetic connection between creator and creation that allows the painted world to respond to the needs of those who seek sanctuary within its boundaries. Ariandel, the painted world encountered in the third game's expansion, demonstrates this principle even more clearly than its predecessor. The entire realm responds to the painter's emotional and spiritual state, growing cold and corrupted when she falls into despair, warming and flourishing when hope returns to her heart. This connection suggests that painted worlds exist as expressions of their creator's deepest desires for what reality could become if freed from the constraints that bind the primary universe. The role of the painter in maintaining these refuge realms reveals another crucial aspect of their nature as escape routes from the eternal cycle. Unlike the gods who seek to preserve the status quo through raw power, or the forces of darkness that would consume everything in pursuit of change, painters work through creation rather than destruction, inspiration rather than domination. The painter in Ariandel speaks of her desire to create a new world, one that will be cold, dark, and very gentle for those who have suffered in the harsh extremes of fire and shadow. This description perfectly captures the painted world's function as refuges from the violent conflicts that define existence in the primary universe. They offer not victory over opposing forces, but escape from the need to fight such battles at all. The process of painting a new world requires pigment made from the dark soul of man, suggesting that these refuges can only be created by those who understand the true nature of humanity's place in the cosmic order. The dark soul, fragmented and distributed among countless individuals, contains within it the power to imagine alternatives to the existing reality, to envision possibilities that transcend the limitations imposed by the cycle of fire and dark. This connection to the dark soul explains why painted worlds feel so welcoming to human visitors while remaining alien to beings defined entirely by their relationship to either fire or darkness. Humans, carrying fragments of the original dark soul within themselves, possess the capacity to adapt to realities governed by different principles. They can find meaning and purpose in painted worlds because their souls contain the same creative essence that brought these realms into existence. The creatures that inhabit painted worlds often display characteristics that suggest they have been transformed by their residence in these alternative realities. The Corvians of Ariandel, for example, have evolved from ordinary ravens into beings capable of complex thought and emotion, their development guided not by the harsh competition that drives evolution in the primary world, but by the gentler principles that govern painted existence. These transformations demonstrate the painted world's power to offer not just refuge, but actual healing to souls damaged by the conflicts of the primary universe. Beings that arrive as refugees carrying the wounds of endless war gradually develop new capacities for joy, creativity, and peaceful cooperation. The painted worlds serve as hospitals for reality itself, places where the fundamental damage caused by the cycle of fire and dark can be slowly repaired. The relationship between painted worlds and ordinary reality operates according to principles that suggest these refuges exist partially outside the normal flow of time. Visitors to painted worlds often report that their journeys within these realms seem to last much longer than the time that passes in the primary universe, as if the painted world's gentler approach to temporal progression allows for more complete experiences within abbreviated timeframes. This temporal flexibility serves the painted world's function as escape routes by allowing refugees to fully process and heal from their traumatic experiences before returning to the primary world. The painted realms provide not just physical sanctuary but emotional and spiritual space for reflection, growth, and recovery from the wounds inflicted by endless conflict. The artistic medium itself becomes significant when we consider the painted world's role as alternatives to cyclic existence. Paint allows for the layering of different colors and textures to create effects that could not be achieved through any single pigment alone. This mirrors the painted world's ability to combine elements from different aspects of reality into harmonious wholes that transcend the limitations of their individual components. The canvas provides a surface that can support infinite revision and refinement, allowing painted worlds to evolve and adapt to the changing needs of their inhabitants in ways that the rigid structures of the primary universe cannot match. Where the cycle of fire and dark demands adherence to predetermined patterns, painted worlds allow for genuine growth and development without requiring violent destruction of existing structures. The frame that surrounds each painted world serves as more than mere decoration or structural support. It functions as a boundary that protects the painted realm's alternative reality from contamination by the primary world's cyclical nature. This protective barrier allows painted worlds to maintain their gentle principles, even when surrounded by the violence and conflict that characterizes ordinary existence. The preservation of these painted sanctuaries across multiple games in the series suggests that they represent something fundamental about the human capacity to imagine and create alternatives to unsatisfactory realities. Each painted world discovered by players contains evidence of multiple generations of refugees who have found peace within its boundaries, their individual stories becoming part of the realm's collective memory. The connection between painted worlds and dreams becomes apparent when we consider how both represent spaces where normal rules can be suspended in favor of symbolic logic and emotional truth. Just as dreams allow the sleeping mind to process experiences that would be overwhelming in waking consciousness, painted worlds provide forums where souls can explore possibilities that would be impossible within the primary world's rigid constraints. The gentle nature of these painted refuges should not be mistaken for weakness or passivity. The peace they offer is not the peace of surrender, but the peace of genuine resolution, conflict transformed rather than merely suppressed. Beings who find sanctuary in painted worlds often discover that they possess strengths and capabilities they never knew they had, qualities that were suppressed by the primary world's emphasis on survival through struggle. The snow that falls throughout these painted realms carries within each flake the dreams and hopes of every soul who has ever sought escape from the endless cycle of fire and darkness. It accumulates not as a burden, but as a blessing, each layer representing another story of transformation, another testament to the possibility of finding peace, even in a universe seemingly designed to prevent such sanctuary. As you rest in contemplation of these painted refuges, let their existence remind you that alternatives to seemingly inevitable patterns always remain possible for those with the vision to imagine them and the courage to create them. The painted worlds teach us that escape from destructive cycles requires not victory over opposing forces, but the wisdom to step outside the conflict entirely, to find or create spaces where different principles can govern existence. In the gentle twilight of painted snow, in the quiet chambers where refugees from cosmic war have found peace at last, we discover that the most profound revolution is not the overthrow of existing powers, but the creation of entirely new possibilities for what existence itself might become. These painted worlds whisper of hope that transcends mere optimism, of peace that surpasses the simple absence of conflict, of the eternal potential for renewal that sleeps within every creative soul. In the earliest days of recorded history, when the first scholars began documenting the strange affliction that would come to define the very nature of existence in their world, they described it with words that carried the weight of divine judgment and cosmic punishment. The undead curse, they wrote, was a mark of shame placed upon humanity for some forgotten transgression, a supernatural disease, that stripped away the most fundamental aspects of what it meant to be alive, while leaving its victims trapped in a mockery of true existence. For centuries, this interpretation shaped how both the cursed and the uncursed understood the nature of undeath. The branded undead were seen as criminals paying for crimes they could not remember, their hollow fate a warning to others about the consequences of defying cosmic law. The dark sign that marked them was viewed as evidence of guilt, a supernatural scarlet letter that identified its bearers as somehow deserving of their terrible fate. Yet there exists another interpretation of this curse, one that emerges when we examine not just the symptoms of undeath, but the circumstances under which the curse first appeared, and the patterns by which it spreads throughout the world. This alternative understanding suggests that rather than being a punishment inflicted upon humanity for past sins, the undead curse represents something far more complex and potentially hopeful, a preparation for transformation that humanity's deepest nature requires, but their conscious minds cannot yet comprehend. Consider the timing of the curse's first appearance in recorded history. The affliction does not manifest randomly or as the result of moral failings on the part of its victims. Instead, it emerges specifically when the Age of Fire begins to fade, when the artificial extension of Gwyn's golden age starts to falter, and the natural cycle that should lead to an Age of Dark begins to reassert itself. This correlation suggests that the undead curse is not separate from the cosmic forces that govern the world, but intimately connected to them. Rather than being an aberration or disease, it may represent humanity's natural response to the unnatural prolonging of conditions that were never meant to be permanent. The curse appears when the world needs to change, but artificial forces prevent that change from occurring naturally. The mechanics of how the curse spreads provide additional evidence for this interpretation. Unlike diseases that spread through contact or contamination, the undead curse seems to choose its victims according to principles that transcend simple biological transmission. The afflicted often report dreams or visions that preceded their transformation, suggesting that the curse responds to psychological and spiritual readiness rather than mere physical vulnerability. Those who receive the dark sign frequently possess qualities that set them apart from their peers even before the curse manifests. Unusual determination, the capacity to endure suffering that would break others, an instinctive understanding of deeper truths about the nature of existence. Rather than selecting victims at random, the curse seems to identify individuals who possess the inner strength necessary to survive what comes next. The process of becoming undead strips away many of the limitations that define mortal existence. The need for sleep, for food, for the countless biological imperatives that constrain living beings, all of these fall away, leaving undead individuals free to pursue goals and undertake journeys that would be impossible for ordinary mortals. This liberation from biological necessity creates opportunities for growth and development that mortal life simply cannot provide. The curse also grants its recipients a form of immortality that, while different from the eternal life enjoyed by gods and other divine beings, offers something potentially more valuable: the opportunity to learn from failure without being destroyed by it. Undead individuals can attempt challenges that would mean certain death for mortals, secure in the knowledge that failure will bring them to a bonfire where they can rest, reflect, and try again. This cycle of death and resurrection mirrors many of the world's most profound learning processes. Just as a student must often fail multiple times before mastering a difficult concept, the undead can approach impossible challenges repeatedly, each attempt adding to their understanding of what is required for success. The curse transforms failure from a permanent ending into a temporary setback, creating conditions where genuine growth becomes possible. The dark sign itself, rather than being merely a mark of shame, may function as a kind of spiritual technology that allows its bearers to maintain their essential identity while undergoing transformations that would otherwise destroy their sense of self. The mark serves as an anchor that keeps the undead connected to their core humanity even as they transcend the biological limitations that normally define human existence. The relationship between the curse and humanity demonstrates remarkable specificity that supports the preparation theory. While other races in the Dark Souls universe can become hollow through various means, the structured progression from living human to undead to hollow follows patterns that seem specifically designed for human psychology and development. The curse works with human nature rather than against it, using innate human capacities for adaptation and growth as the foundation for transformation. The communal aspects of undead existence also suggest preparation rather than punishment. Undead individuals naturally form communities around bonfires, these sacred flames serving as gathering points where knowledge and resources can be shared. The cooperation that emerges among the cursed transcends the petty competitions that often characterize mortal society, as if the curse strips away the superficial concerns that divide people and reveals the deeper connections that unite them. The phenomenon of summoning, by which undead individuals can call upon each other for aid across the boundaries that normally separate different realities, represents a form of spiritual technology that may be the curse's ultimate gift to humanity. This ability to reach across dimensions and timelines to offer and receive assistance suggests that the curse is preparing humanity for forms of existence that transcend the limitations of individual identity and separate consciousness. The gradual loss of memory that accompanies extended periods of undeath, rather than being mere decay, may represent the careful stripping away of attachments and identities that would otherwise prevent the fundamental transformation the curse is designed to facilitate. Like a snake shedding its skin, the undead gradually release their connections to their mortal past, creating space for something entirely new to emerge. The process of becoming hollow, viewed through this lens, represents not failure, but a necessary stage in a transformation that most observers simply do not understand. Hollows retain their essential humanity while releasing the specific personality traits and individual desires that might interfere with their participation in larger cosmic processes. They become vessels capable of being filled with purposes greater than anything their individual selves could have conceived. This interpretation finds support in the behavior of certain hollows throughout the series, particularly those found in areas of great significance to the world's deeper mysteries. Rather than being mindlessly destructive, many hollows appear to be guarding important locations or maintaining ancient rituals whose purposes have been forgotten by the living. They serve functions that suggest they understand something about their condition that outside observers cannot perceive. The connection between the undead curse and the dark soul becomes clear when we consider how the curse responds to humanity's relationship with their essential nature. Those who embrace their humanity, who understand their connection to the dark soul, and work in harmony with its principles, often find that their undead condition becomes a source of strength rather than weakness. They retain their memories, their personalities, and their capacity for growth while gaining the advantages that come with freedom from biological limitation. Those who fight against their nature, who cling to outdated concepts of what it means to be human, or who reject their connection to the dark soul, often find their undead condition increasingly difficult to bear. They lose their memories more quickly, become hollow sooner, and ultimately serve as warnings about the dangers of resisting the transformation that the curse is designed to facilitate. The timing of the curse's spread throughout the population also supports the preparation theory. As each age of fire approaches its natural end, more and more humans receive the dark sign, as if the curse responds to cosmic conditions that require larger numbers of prepared individuals. This suggests that the curse serves a function in the broader cycles that govern reality, preparing humanity for the changes that each transition between ages demands. The various endings available to the player character in each game demonstrate different ways that the curse's preparation might ultimately be fulfilled. The choice to link the fire represents one path, where the undead individual uses their transformation to become capable of sustaining the current age through personal sacrifice. The choice to walk away from the flame represents another path, where the prepared individual allows natural change to occur without interference. More esoteric endings, such as the usurpation of fire available in the third game, suggest that the curse may be preparing humanity for possibilities that transcend the simple binary of fire and dark ages. These endings require not just individual transformation, but collective preparation, as if the curse has been slowly building toward a moment when humanity as a whole will be ready to take control of their cosmic destiny. The dreams and visions that often precede or accompany the curse's manifestation provide glimpses of what this ultimate preparation might be leading toward. Undead individuals frequently report experiencing awareness that extends beyond their individual consciousness, sensing connections to other undead, to the cosmic forces that govern reality, and to possibilities that exist beyond the current structure of existence. These expanded awareness experiences suggest that the curse is preparing humanity to participate in forms of consciousness that transcend individual identity while preserving the essential qualities that make human existence valuable. Rather than destroying humanity's nature, the curse refines and elevates it, creating conditions where human creativity, compassion, and determination can operate on cosmic scales. The curse also appears to enhance human capacity for empathy and understanding, as evidenced by the deep connections that often form between undead individuals who encounter each other on their journeys. These relationships frequently transcend the boundaries of language, culture, and even species, suggesting that the curse develops faculties that allow for more direct forms of communication and understanding than normal human interaction permits. The patience required to master the challenges that undead existence presents serves as training for a form of temporal awareness that extends far beyond normal human lifespan considerations. Undead individuals learn to think in terms of cycles and patterns that span centuries or millennia, developing perspectives that prepare them to participate intelligently in cosmic processes that unfold across vast stretches of time. The courage demanded by the undead condition, the willingness to face seemingly impossible odds repeatedly without surrendering to despair, builds psychological and spiritual muscles that may be necessary for the ultimate transformation the curse is preparing humanity to undergo. Each resurrection from apparent defeat strengthens the undead individual's core sense of self, while simultaneously teaching them that identity can survive radical changes in circumstances and condition. As you rest in contemplation of this alternative understanding of the undead curse, consider how many of life's apparent misfortunes might actually represent preparations for developments that we cannot yet perceive or understand. The curse teaches us that transformation often begins with what appears to be loss or degradation, but ultimately leads to capabilities and experiences that would have been impossible without the initial stripping away of familiar limitations. In the gentle darkness that exists between waking and sleeping, between one breath and the next, we can sense the presence of possibilities that extend beyond our current understanding of what existence might become. The undead curse, viewed as preparation rather than punishment, whispers of transformations that await not just individual souls but consciousness itself, evolution not just of form but of fundamental nature, changes that will reveal the true purpose behind what once seemed like meaningless suffering. Rest now in the knowledge that even the most difficult passages in existence may serve purposes greater than immediate understanding can grasp, that preparation often comes disguised as hardship, and that the deepest transformations require the courage to release familiar certainties in favor of possibilities that exceed the boundaries of current imagination. In the shadows that exist between documented history and whispered legend, where the official chronicles maintained by gods and kings grow silent about matters too sensitive for public record, there moves a figure whose influence extends throughout the Dark Souls universe like invisible threads connecting seemingly unrelated events across vast expanses of time and space. Velka, the goddess of sin, occupies a position in the cosmic hierarchy that defies easy categorization, serving functions that transcend the simple binary of good and evil that defines most divine beings. Unlike the other gods whose domains are clearly defined, and whose motivations can be understood through conventional analysis of power and territory, Velka operates according to principles that suggest she serves as a cosmic force, maintaining balance in a universe that constantly threatens to spiral into chaos through the unchecked ambitions of lesser powers. Her very title hints at this deeper purpose, for she is not merely the goddess who punishes sin, but the divine embodiment of the concept that all actions, no matter how carefully hidden or cleverly justified, eventually face consequences proportionate to their true nature. The most compelling theory that has emerged from careful analysis of Velka's scattered appearances throughout the series suggests that she functions as a kind of cosmic justice system, an impersonal force that ensures universal laws are maintained even when conventional authorities fail in their duties or become corrupted by the very powers they were meant to regulate. This interpretation transforms her from a simple punitive deity into something far more sophisticated, a divine mechanism that preserves the fundamental order upon which reality itself depends. Consider the evidence that supports this remarkable understanding of her nature. Velka's influence appears most strongly in moments when the established order has failed to address genuine injustices, or when powerful beings have escaped accountability through political maneuvering or divine privilege. She emerges not as an alternative authority seeking to replace existing powers, but as a corrective force that fills gaps left by inadequate or corrupted systems of justice. The pardoners who serve as her earthly representatives demonstrate this principle in their daily practice. These enigmatic figures appear in locations where conventional authorities have proven insufficient to address the spiritual burdens carried by individuals seeking redemption or resolution. They offer absolution not as representatives of established religious institutions, but as agents of a higher justice that operates independently of political considerations or institutional prejudices. The services provided by pardoners reveal Velka's understanding of justice as something that must address not just external actions but internal states of being. Their ability to absolve sin goes beyond mere ritual forgiveness to encompass actual spiritual healing, suggesting that Velka's conception of justice includes restoration and redemption rather than focusing solely on punishment and retribution. The Oswald of Karim, who serves as a pardoner in the first game, exemplifies this approach to divine justice. His presence in the cathedral above the undead parish provides those who have committed grave sins with an opportunity for genuine redemption, but his services come with costs that ensure the process involves real sacrifice rather than mere convenience. This balance between mercy and accountability reflects Velka's understanding that true justice must transform those who seek it, rather than simply excusing their past actions. The ravens and crows that serve as Velka's messengers and agents throughout the series provide another layer of evidence for her role as a cosmic force maintaining universal balance. These intelligent birds appear at crucial moments throughout the player's journey, their presence often marking transitions between different stages of understanding or awareness about the true nature of the challenges being faced. The crow demons found in the painted world of Ariamis demonstrate Velka's connection to realms that exist outside conventional reality, suggesting that her influence extends beyond the primary universe into alternative dimensions where different principles of justice might apply. These creatures serve as guardians of outcasts and refugees, protecting those who seek sanctuary from the harsh judgments of the ordinary world, while ensuring that the painted realm itself maintains its character as a place of genuine peace and restoration. The relationship between Velka and the painted world becomes particularly significant when we consider theories about her role in creating or maintaining these alternative realities as spaces where different forms of justice can operate. The painted worlds serve as laboratories for exploring what redemption and restoration might look like when freed from the limitations imposed by conventional power structures and political considerations. The Crowquill's weapon associated with Velka's followers tells its own story about her understanding of justice as something that must be both precise and personal. These weapons require exceptional skill to wield effectively, suggesting that those who serve Velka must develop not just martial prowess, but the judgment necessary to apply force with discrimination and restraint. The weapon's design emphasizes accuracy over raw power, reflecting a philosophy that values targeted intervention over overwhelming force. The Book of the Guilty, maintained by Velka's followers, represents perhaps the most concrete evidence for her role as a cosmic justice system. This mysterious tome records the sins of individuals across vast spans of time and space, tracking transgressions that conventional authorities either cannot detect or choose to ignore. The book's existence suggests that Velka operates according to standards of accountability that transcend political boundaries and temporal limitations. The invasion mechanics associated with this book reveal Velka's understanding of justice as something that must sometimes operate through unconventional means. When formal legal systems fail to address genuine crimes, her followers can be called upon to serve as agents of divine retribution, pursuing wrongdoers across dimensional boundaries if necessary to ensure that accountability is eventually achieved. The occult weapons, blessed by Velka, demonstrate her particular concern with limiting the power of divine beings who might otherwise consider themselves above moral law. These weapons possess the ability to inflict permanent damage on gods and other immortal entities, suggesting that Velka's concept of justice recognizes no exceptions based on divine status or supernatural immunity from consequences. This aspect of her divine portfolio becomes particularly significant when we consider the broader context of the Dark Souls universe, where gods routinely engage in actions that would be considered unconscionable if performed by mortals. Velka's occult weapons serve as a reminder that divine power carries with it divine responsibility, and that even the most exalted beings remain subject to cosmic laws that transcend their individual will or authority. The timing of Velka's interventions throughout the series reveals patterns that suggest she operates according to long-term strategies that span multiple ages and civilizations. Her influence appears not in response to immediate crises, but as part of larger processes designed to maintain fundamental balances that might otherwise be disrupted by the ambitions of gods, demons, or other powerful entities seeking to reshape reality according to their private desires. The environmental storytelling surrounding locations associated with Velka often emphasizes themes of hidden knowledge and secret wisdom, suggesting that her understanding of justice operates according to principles that are not immediately apparent to surface observation. Her followers must develop not just moral clarity but intellectual sophistication, the ability to perceive patterns and connections that escape conventional analysis. The Annex Key, found in areas connected to Velka's influence, opens doors that lead to hidden chambers containing treasures and knowledge that cannot be obtained through normal exploration. This mechanic reinforces the theme that true understanding of justice requires going beyond surface appearances to discover deeper truths that conventional authorities either cannot perceive or deliberately choose to conceal. The relationship between Velka and concepts of absolution reveals her understanding that genuine justice must include provisions for redemption and transformation, rather than focusing exclusively on punishment and retribution. The pardoning services offered by her followers recognize that individuals can change and grow beyond their past mistakes, but they ensure that such redemption involves real spiritual work rather than mere ritual observance. The costs associated with seeking Velka's absolution reflect this understanding that redemption must be earned through genuine sacrifice and commitment to change. The souls required for pardoning services represent not just payment, but actual spiritual currency, ensuring that those who seek forgiveness have invested something meaningful in the process of their own transformation. The multiplayer aspects of Velka's influence demonstrate her understanding that justice operates not just on individual levels, but through community relationships and shared responsibility. The invasion mechanics associated with her Book of the Guilty create situations where players must confront the consequences of their actions, not through abstract punishment, but through direct engagement with other individuals affected by their choices. This approach to justice through personal encounter, rather than institutional authority, reflects a sophisticated understanding of how moral development actually occurs. Rather than simply imposing external penalties for wrongdoing, Velka's system creates opportunities for genuine understanding and growth through direct experience of how one's actions affect others. The mystery surrounding Velka's ultimate purposes and the limited direct information available about her motivations may itself be evidence of her wisdom as a cosmic force. True justice often operates most effectively when those subject to its influence cannot predict or manipulate its workings through political maneuvering or attempts to curry favor with the authorities responsible for its implementation. By remaining largely hidden and working through indirect influence rather than direct command, Velka ensures that her interventions maintain their effectiveness across long periods of time and through changing political circumstances. Her approach suggests an understanding that sustainable justice systems must be robust enough to function independently of the particular individuals who happen to be in positions of authority at any given moment. The ravens that serve as her messengers embody this principle of justice that operates through natural law rather than arbitrary decree. These intelligent birds follow patterns of behavior that reflect deeper cosmic principles rather than responding to momentary whims or political pressures. Their presence at crucial moments suggests that Velka's influence operates according to timing, determined by cosmic necessity rather than human convenience or expectation. As you rest in contemplation of this mysterious goddess whose influence extends throughout reality like invisible threads connecting all actions to their inevitable consequences, consider how the concept of cosmic justice might operate in your own existence. Velka teaches us that accountability transcends the limitations of human institutions, that genuine justice includes provisions for redemption as well as retribution, and that the most profound forms of moral development often occur through direct experience rather than abstract instruction. In the gentle darkness where ravens gather to whisper secrets between worlds, in the quiet moments where conscience speaks more clearly than the noise of daily concerns, we can sense the presence of forces that ensure no action ever truly escapes accountability. No genuine seeking of redemption goes unnoticed, and no sincere effort toward justice remains without support from sources beyond immediate perception. The cosmic balance that Velka maintains operates with patience that spans eternities and wisdom that encompasses possibilities beyond current understanding, reminding us that justice, like truth, has its own timeline that transcends human impatience and political expedience. In the realm of Lordran, where ancient stones bear witness to events that span millennia and where the very landscape seems to shift according to principles that defy conventional understanding of geography and physics, there exists a fundamental distortion in the fabric of reality itself that transforms the simple concepts of time and space into something far more fluid and mysterious than mortal minds are equipped to comprehend. The world that the chosen undead traverses operates according to laws that seem to exist in constant tension with the logical expectations that govern ordinary existence. Structures that should be separated by vast distances instead connect through doorways and passages that compress or eliminate intervening space entirely. Areas that should exist in different time periods can be accessed simultaneously, as if past and present have become layered upon each other like pages in a book whose binding has come loose, allowing different chapters to be read in any order the reader chooses. The most compelling theory that has emerged from careful analysis of these spatial and temporal anomalies suggests that the fundamental forces governing reality in the Dark Souls universe have been compromised by the artificial extension of the Age of Fire beyond its natural lifespan. When Gwyn chose to link the first flame rather than allowing the natural cycle of fire and dark to proceed, he created conditions that distorted the basic structure of space and time in ways that continue to influence every aspect of existence throughout the series. Consider the evidence that supports this interpretation of reality as fundamentally broken rather than merely mysterious. The player's ability to summon phantoms of other individuals across dimensional boundaries represents more than simple magical assistance. It demonstrates that the barriers between different versions of reality have become permeable in ways that allow consciousness and identity to bridge gaps that should be absolute and insurmountable. These phantom encounters suggest that multiple versions of the same events are occurring simultaneously across different dimensional layers, with individuals from various iterations of reality able to interact and influence each other's experiences, despite existing in what should be completely separate timelines. The summoning stones that facilitate these encounters do not create the connections between realities, but merely make visible and accessible pathways that already exist due to the fundamental instability of the space-time continuum. The mechanics of player death and resurrection further illustrate the extent to which normal temporal causality has been disrupted. When the chosen undead falls in battle and awakens at a bonfire, they retain all knowledge and experience gained up to the point of death, yet the world around them resets to a previous state as if those events had never occurred. This creates a form of temporal paradox where effects persist without their causes, where learning accumulates despite the apparent reversal of the experiences that generated such knowledge. This resurrection cycle operates according to principles that suggest time itself has become circular rather than linear, with moments of significance serving as anchor points around which reality can reorganize itself. The bonfires that serve as resurrection points exist not just as physical locations but as temporal constants that maintain their identity across multiple iterations of events, creating islands of stability in an ocean of chronological chaos. The bosses that guard crucial areas throughout the series demonstrate another aspect of temporal distortion through their ability to return to life after being defeated. These powerful entities do not simply regenerate from physical damage, but appear to be restored to their previous state through the same temporal mechanisms that govern the chosen undead's resurrection. This suggests that the entire world exists in a state of temporal loop, where significant events can be repeated indefinitely without reaching any final resolution. The environmental inconsistencies that characterize the world's geography provide additional evidence for fundamental distortions in the nature of space itself. Areas that should be separated by hundreds of miles can be reached through brief journeys that compress vast distances into manageable passages. The elevator that descends from the undead parish to New Londo ruins travels through what appears to be a relatively short vertical distance, yet arrives at a location that should be far below sea level, suggesting that the normal three-dimensional relationships between locations have been warped beyond recognition. The view of Anor Londo from various locations throughout Lordran demonstrates this spatial distortion most clearly. The Divine City appears to be visible from multiple vantage points that should be geographically impossible given the intervening terrain, as if the city exists partially outside normal space and can be perceived from locations that have no clear line of sight to its actual position. This visual accessibility, despite geographic impossibility, suggests that divine realms operate according to different spatial laws than mortal areas. The connection between different areas through mechanisms that bypass normal travel demonstrates the extent to which conventional physics have broken down. The orange guidance soapstone messages that players can leave for each other appear across dimensional boundaries, providing assistance and warnings that transcend the normal limitations of communication between separate individuals in different realities. The phenomenon of vagrant enemies that migrate between different players' worlds represents perhaps the most striking example of how the boundaries between separate realities have become permeable. These creatures carry with them items and characteristics from their original worlds, creating a form of cross-dimensional contamination that should be impossible if reality maintained its normal structural integrity. The timing mechanisms that govern various events throughout the series operate according to principles that seem to exist independently of normal temporal flow. The bells that must be rung to progress certain quest lines can be activated from locations that are separated not just by distance but by apparent time periods. Yet their effects occur simultaneously across these separated contexts, as if temporal causality has been replaced by symbolic resonance. The co-op mechanics that allow multiple players to collaborate on challenges demonstrate that the concept of individual timeline has lost much of its meaning in a world where multiple versions of events can occur simultaneously. Each participant in these cooperative encounters brings their own version of reality to the shared experience, creating composite situations that combine elements from different dimensional layers. The invasion mechanics reveal another aspect of temporal distortion, as players from different progression points in their journeys can encounter each other despite being at fundamentally different stages of the same overall narrative. This suggests that the concept of linear story progression has been replaced by a more complex structure where all possible moments exist simultaneously and can be accessed according to principles that transcend normal chronological sequence. The kiln of the first flame represents the theoretical center point where all these temporal and spatial distortions converge. This location serves as the nexus where different ages, different possibilities, and different versions of reality come together in a space that exists outside normal dimensional constraints. The fact that this location can be reached from multiple different points in the journey, and that it seems to exist simultaneously in different time periods, suggests that the first flame itself serves as the anchor point around which all reality reorganizes itself. The Lords of Cinder who gather at this location come from different ages and different iterations of the linking cycle, yet they can all be encountered simultaneously, as if temporal sequence has collapsed entirely in the vicinity of the flame. Their presence together in the same space, despite originating from different historical periods, demonstrates that the kiln exists in a state of temporal convergence, where all moments of the fire's linking become accessible simultaneously. The dreamlike logic that governs many interactions throughout the series suggests that reality has taken on characteristics more commonly associated with unconscious mental processes than with physical laws. Locations appear and disappear based on symbolic significance rather than geographic logic, while encounters with various characters seem to be governed by narrative importance rather than realistic probability. This dream logic becomes particularly apparent in areas like the Ash Lake, which exists far below what should be the bottom of the world, yet contains an entire forest of massive trees that stretch toward a sky that should not be visible from such depths. The presence of an ancient dragon in this impossible space reinforces the sense that normal physical laws have been suspended in favor of symbolic relationships and mythic significance. The multiplayer aspects of the series demonstrate that these reality distortions extend beyond individual experience to affect the fundamental nature of how consciousness itself operates in this world. Players can share experiences across dimensional boundaries, leaving messages and assistance for each other despite existing in separate realities, as if awareness itself has become partially collective rather than strictly individual. The various covenant systems that govern online interactions operate according to principles that suggest loyalty and intention can transcend normal limitations of space and time. Members of the same covenant can assist or conflict with each other across vast distances and different dimensional layers, as if shared purpose creates connections that bypass normal causality. The time distortions become most apparent when examining quest lines that seem to operate according to multiple different temporal frameworks simultaneously. Characters can appear in different locations at the same time, or events can occur in sequences that seem to contradict their apparent chronological order, as if the world contains multiple overlapping versions of the same narrative playing out according to different rhythms and patterns. As you rest in contemplation of these profound distortions in the fundamental nature of reality, consider how the breakdown of normal temporal and spatial relationships might actually create opportunities for forms of experience and understanding that would be impossible under ordinary physical laws. The world of Dark Souls teaches us that when familiar structures collapse, they often reveal deeper patterns and connections that were always present but previously hidden by the limitations of conventional perception. In the gentle space between one breath and the next, between the moment of falling asleep and the first emergence of dreams, we can sense how fluid the boundaries between different states of existence truly are. The temporal distortions of Lordran remind us that time itself may be far more malleable than daily experience suggests, that space may be more symbolic than geographical, and that reality may operate according to principles of meaning and significance rather than mere mechanical causation. The broken world reveals not chaos but a deeper order, not confusion but a more complex form of logic, not destruction but the emergence of possibilities that transcend the limitations of what we previously thought possible. In this understanding, the distortions of space and time become not problems to be solved, but invitations to expand our conception of what existence itself might become when freed from the constraints of conventional expectation. In the deepest places of the world, where light from the surface never reaches, and where the very stones seem to pulse with a darkness older than memory, there lies a realm that exists at the intersection of what is and what could be, a space that challenges every assumption about the nature of good and evil, creation and destruction, hope and despair. This is the abyss, and the most revolutionary theory that has emerged from decades of contemplation suggests that rather than being the corruption of natural order, it may represent the natural state toward which all existence ultimately yearns. The conventional understanding of the abyss, carefully cultivated by those in power and reinforced through countless generations of fearful whispers, paints it as a force of pure malevolence that seeks nothing but the destruction of all that is good and beautiful in the world. According to this interpretation, The abyss represents chaos unleashed, darkness given form for the purpose of consuming light, an aberration that must be contained or destroyed before it can spread its influence throughout reality. Yet this understanding emerges from sources that have their own reasons for portraying the abyss as an enemy to be feared, rather than a mystery to be understood. The gods who originally fought against the darkness had much to lose if their subjects began to question whether the Age of Fire they had established was truly the best possible state for the world to exist in. By characterizing the abyss as inherently evil, they ensured that few would dare to examine it closely enough to discover its true nature. Consider the circumstances surrounding the abyss's first major manifestation in recorded history, the tragedy that befell the city of Ulasil when its scholars delved too deeply into ancient secrets and awakened forces they were not prepared to comprehend. The official accounts describe this event as a cautionary tale about the dangers of seeking forbidden knowledge, but closer examination reveals details that suggest a far more complex and tragic narrative. Manus, the being who became known as the Father of the Abyss, was not originally a creature of malevolence, seeking to spread darkness throughout the world. Historical fragments suggest that he was once a human, a member of the ancient pygmy race that had been gifted with fragments of the dark soul in the earliest days of the world's history. His transformation into the primal expression of abyssal power came not from inherent evil but from profound trauma inflicted upon him by those who feared what he represented. The residents of Ulasil, in their curiosity about ancient history and their desire to understand the true origins of humanity, disturbed Manus's grave and subjected his remains to experiments that tortured his essence across centuries of time. This violation of his rest, this desecration of his fundamental nature, drove him to a madness so complete that it tore holes in reality itself and allowed the abyss to pour forth into the physical world. This origin story transforms our understanding of the abyss from a force of inherent evil to a natural response to unnatural trauma. The darkness that spread from Manus was not malevolence seeking victims, but pain-seeking expression, anguish so profound that it warped the fabric of reality around itself. The abyss became a manifestation of suffering that had exceeded all capacity for individual containment and spilled over into the wider world. The behavior of creatures touched by the abyss supports this interpretation of darkness as expression of pain rather than embodiment of evil. The residents of Ulasil who were transformed by abyssal influence did not become mindless destroyers, but rather beings consumed by a specific form of anguish that reflected their participation in the original trauma inflicted upon Manus. The humanity phantoms that emerge from pools of concentrated dark energy display behaviors that suggest longing rather than malice, reaching toward living beings not to destroy but to reconnect with the human essence they have lost. These creatures represent not corruption of humanity, but humanity distilled to its most essential element, stripped of the civilized constraints that normally govern social interaction, but retaining the fundamental drive to connect with others of their kind. The four kings of New Londo present another crucial piece of evidence for reconsidering the nature of abyssal influence. These rulers were not conquered by the abyss through external force, but chose to embrace its power after coming to understand something about the true nature of reality that their previous existence had not revealed to them. Their decision to accept the dark suggests that they found in the abyss something that the Age of Fire could not provide. The conventional interpretation characterizes their choice as seduction by evil, but alternative analysis suggests they may have discovered that the abyss offered forms of existence and awareness that were more authentic than the artificial structures maintained by divine authority. Their transformation allowed them to transcend the limitations that had previously defined their identities and capabilities, suggesting that the abyss might function as a medium for genuine evolution rather than mere corruption. The serpent Cathy, who serves as an advocate for the Age of Dark, provides information that challenges many of the fundamental assumptions about the relationship between light and darkness that form the foundation of the established order. According to his account, the Age of Fire was never meant to be permanent, and humanity's true destiny lies not in serving as fuel for the flames, but in embracing their connection to the dark soul and the forms of existence it makes possible. Cathy's perspective suggests that the abyss represents not a deviation from natural order, but a return to it, a restoration of conditions that existed before Gwyn's artificial intervention created the imbalances that have plagued the world ever since. The darkness he advocates for is not the absence of light, but a different form of illumination, one that reveals truths that conventional wisdom has worked to conceal. The city of New Londo itself provides a case study in how fear of the abyss can lead to atrocities that exceed anything the darkness itself has accomplished. When the abyss began to spread within the city, the authorities chose to flood the entire settlement, drowning thousands of innocent residents in order to contain the dark influence. This response reveals how the fear of darkness can motivate actions that are far more destructive than the darkness itself. The ghosts that haunt the drowned ruins of New Londo carry within their ethereal forms the memory of this betrayal, their continued existence serving as testimony to the injustice that was committed in the name of protecting the world from abyssal influence. Their presence suggests that the true horror of New Londo lies not in the spread of darkness, but in the willingness of those in power to sacrifice entire populations rather than risk allowing alternative forms of existence to take root. The Abyss Watchers of Farron represent a fascinating evolution in humanity's relationship with abyssal power, demonstrating that it is possible to work with dark forces without being consumed by them. These warriors chose to take the abyss into themselves, using its power to hunt creatures that had been corrupted by uncontrolled exposure to dark influence, while maintaining their essential humanity through collective identity and shared purpose. Their approach suggests that the danger of the abyss lies not in its inherent nature, but in approaching it without proper understanding or preparation. By accepting darkness as part of their identity, while maintaining their commitment to protecting others, the Abyss Watchers demonstrate that it is possible to integrate abyssal power into a framework of positive values and constructive purpose. The Deep, which appears as a major force in the third game, represents what may be the abyss's natural evolution when allowed to develop without interference or persecution. Rather than the chaotic darkness that emerged from Manus's trauma, the Deep appears to offer a form of existence that maintains structure and purpose while incorporating the transformative potential that characterizes abyssal influence. Aldrich's visions of the Deep suggest a future where the harsh extremes of fire and traditional darkness give way to something more nuanced and sustainable, a form of existence that combines the depth and authenticity associated with the abyss with the order and stability that civilization requires. His consumption of other beings, while disturbing from conventional moral perspectives, may represent a form of spiritual integration that transcends individual identity in favor of collective consciousness. The relationship between the abyss and creativity becomes apparent when we examine how exposure to dark influence affects human consciousness and capability. Many of those touched by abyssal power display enhanced abilities that suggest the darkness functions as a catalyst for human potential rather than a suppressant of human nature. The sorceries that draw power from the abyss require not just magical knowledge, but emotional depth and psychological complexity that conventional magic does not demand. These dark arts seem to respond to the practitioner's understanding of suffering, loss, and the deeper currents of human experience, suggesting that the abyss contains within itself forms of wisdom that are inaccessible to those who remain within the comfortable boundaries of conventional existence. The architecture found in areas touched by abyssal influence often displays an organic quality that contrasts sharply with the rigid geometries favored by divine construction projects. Structures that grow from dark influence seem to emerge from the landscape itself rather than being imposed upon it, suggesting that the abyss works with natural forces rather than attempting to dominate or replace them. The timing of major abyssal manifestations throughout the series corresponds closely with periods when the artificial extension of the Age of Fire has created conditions of particular stress and instability in the natural order. This correlation suggests that the abyss emerges not as an invading force, but as a natural response to unnatural conditions, a form of cosmic healing that becomes necessary when conventional authorities refuse to allow natural cycles to proceed. The peace that can be found in areas where abyssal influence has been allowed to develop without persecution reveals another aspect of its true nature. The painted world of Ariamis, while not directly abyssal, shares many characteristics with dark-influenced areas and serves as a sanctuary for beings that have been rejected or cast out by the established order. The relationships that form between individuals who have been touched by abyssal influence often display a depth and authenticity that transcends the superficial connections that characterize much social interaction in the conventional world. These bonds seem to emerge from shared understanding of suffering and transformation that creates forms of empathy and mutual support not available to those who have never experienced genuine darkness. As you rest in contemplation of this alternative understanding of the abyss as natural evolution rather than supernatural corruption, consider how many of the forces that conventional wisdom teaches us to fear might actually represent opportunities for growth and transformation that we have been conditioned to avoid. The darkness teaches us that some forms of depth and authenticity can only be accessed by those willing to venture beyond the comfortable boundaries of accepted truth. In the gentle shadows that exist at the edges of consciousness, where familiar categories begin to blur and new possibilities emerge from the dissolution of old certainties, we can sense the presence of transformative forces that offer not destruction but profound change. Not the end of what we are, but the beginning of what we might become, when freed from the limitations that have previously defined our existence. The abyss whispers of depths that contain not emptiness, but fullness beyond current comprehension, darkness that illuminates rather than obscures, dissolution that leads not to ending but to new forms of beginning, that transcend the boundaries of individual identity while preserving everything that makes consciousness precious and unique. In the far reaches of the world, beyond the territories claimed by gods and demons alike, there lies a kingdom built upon principles that challenge every assumption about the nature of power, identity, and the relationship between life and death. This is Londor, the land of hollows, where beings who have surrendered their individual humanity in service of a greater purpose work toward a vision of the future that transcends the endless cycle of fire and dark that has trapped the world in patterns of destruction and renewal for countless ages. The conventional understanding of hollowing, carefully maintained by those who benefit from the current order, characterizes it as a fate worse than death, a gradual erosion of everything that makes existence meaningful until only an empty shell remains, driven by base instincts and incapable of growth or genuine connection. Yet the evidence emerging from Londor suggests that this interpretation serves the interests of those who wish to prevent humanity from exploring alternatives to the established cosmic hierarchy. The most compelling theory that has emerged from careful analysis of Londor's culture and ambitions suggests that the Sable Church and its followers have discovered how to transform the curse of hollowing into a tool for transcendence, creating a form of existence that preserves the essential qualities of consciousness, while freeing individuals from the limitations and vulnerabilities that have made humanity dependent upon the favor of gods and the maintenance of artificial cosmic cycles. Consider the sophistication of the society that has emerged within Londor's borders, a civilization that functions with remarkable efficiency despite being populated entirely by beings that conventional wisdom would dismiss as mindless monsters. The hollow citizens of this realm engage in complex activities requiring planning, cooperation, and abstract reasoning, demonstrating that the loss of individual humanity does not necessarily result in the loss of intelligence or purpose. The Sable Church itself represents a theological and philosophical achievement that rivals anything produced by the great religious institutions of the Age of Fire. Their understanding of the relationship between individual identity and cosmic purpose has enabled them to develop practices that allow hollows to maintain their capacity for growth and learning while freeing themselves from the psychological attachments that normally bind souls to specific forms of existence. Uria of Londor, the primary representative of this philosophy encountered by the player, embodies the potential that the Sable Church's approach makes possible. Despite having undergone complete hollowing, she retains not only her intelligence and memories, but also her capacity for complex emotional responses, strategic thinking, and genuine concern for the welfare of others. Her condition demonstrates that hollowing need not result in the loss of everything valuable about human existence. The marriage ceremony that Uria can perform represents more than a simple political alliance or personal relationship. This ritual creates a form of spiritual unity that transcends individual identity while preserving the essential qualities that make each participant unique and valuable. The Hollow Lord created through this process possesses capabilities that exceed what either partner could achieve alone while maintaining connections to both their individual histories and their shared purpose. The deep that serves as the ultimate goal of Londor's ambitions reveals itself not as the chaotic darkness feared by conventional authorities, but as a form of existence that combines the depth and authenticity associated with the dark soul with the stability and order necessary for sustainable civilization. This vision represents a third alternative to the binary choice between the Age of Fire and the Age of Dark that has previously defined cosmic possibilities. The relationship between the deep and the abyss demonstrates Londor's sophisticated understanding of how dark forces can be channeled and directed rather than simply feared and suppressed. Where uncontrolled exposure to abyssal influence typically results in madness and destruction, the Sable Church has developed methods for integrating dark power into structured frameworks that enhance rather than diminish human potential. Aldrich's visions of the deep, while disturbing in their implications for individual autonomy, suggest a future where the harsh individualism that characterizes both divine and human societies gives way to forms of collective consciousness that preserve individual value while enabling unprecedented cooperation and mutual understanding. His consumption of others represents not destruction but integration, a process by which separate identities contribute to a larger whole without losing their essential contributions. The timing of Londor's emergence as a major force in the world's affairs corresponds precisely with the final breakdown of the linking cycle that has maintained the Age of Fire far beyond its natural lifespan. This correlation suggests that the Sable Church's philosophy represents not an opportunistic grab for power, but a carefully developed response to cosmic conditions that demand new approaches to existence and governance. The population strategy employed by Londor reveals their understanding that sustainable change requires not just philosophical innovation, but demographic transformation. By encouraging hollowing among those who choose to embrace their vision, they create populations that are no longer dependent upon the artificial life support systems that maintain conventional civilization during the extended Age of Fire. The pilgrim butterflies that serve as guides and transportation for Londor's followers demonstrate the realm's integration with natural forces that have been abandoned or suppressed by other civilizations. These creatures represent a form of symbiosis between human consciousness and natural phenomena that suggests Londor's approach to existence includes harmony with rather than domination over the forces that govern the physical world. The relationship between hollowing and memory reveals another crucial aspect of the Sable Church's understanding of identity and consciousness. While conventional hollowing results in the gradual loss of personal memories and individual attachments, the directed hollowing, practiced by Londor's followers, seems to preserve essential memories while releasing the emotional attachments that normally prevent individuals from adapting to radically different circumstances. This selective retention of memory, combined with emotional flexibility, creates individuals who can learn from their past experiences without being bound by them, who can maintain connections to their origins while remaining open to transformation that transcends their previous limitations. The result is a form of consciousness that combines the wisdom that comes from experience with the adaptability that change requires. The Ringed City's relationship to Londor's ultimate plans reveals the historical depth of the Sable Church's vision and their understanding of humanity's true place in the cosmic order. The ancient pygmy lords who first received the Dark Soul understood principles about the nature of existence and consciousness that have been systematically suppressed or forgotten during the long Age of Fire. Londor's work represents not innovation but restoration, an attempt to recover and implement understanding that was possessed by humanity's earliest ancestors but lost during the millennia of divine dominance. Their hollowing practices may actually restore human consciousness to something closer to its original intended state rather than reducing it to some diminished condition. The covenant system that governs relationships between Londor's followers and potential allies demonstrates their understanding that sustainable change requires voluntary participation rather than forced conversion. The mound makers and other groups associated with their influence offer individuals opportunities to explore alternative approaches to existence without requiring complete commitment to unfamiliar philosophies. This gradual approach to transformation reflects wisdom about how consciousness actually changes and develops, rather than demanding immediate and total conversion to their worldview. Londor's agents provide opportunities for individuals to experiment with different forms of existence and gradually discover whether such alternatives serve their deepest needs and aspirations. The weapons and equipment associated with Londor's forces reveal their sophisticated understanding of how spiritual principles can be embodied in material forms. The Dark Hand and other implements blessed by the Sable Church function not just as tools, but as expressions of philosophical principles about the relationship between individual will and collective purpose. These items demonstrate that Londor's vision includes not just theoretical understanding, but practical methods for implementing their insights about consciousness and identity in daily life. Their approach to spiritual development includes material culture that supports and reinforces the psychological and spiritual changes they seek to cultivate. The architectural principles evident in Londor's construction projects emphasize functionality and collective benefit over individual display or divine grandeur. Their buildings serve the needs of their inhabitants rather than proclaiming the glory of their rulers, suggesting a fundamental reorientation of priorities away from hierarchical display toward communal welfare. This architectural philosophy extends to their understanding of political organization, where leadership serves to coordinate collective efforts rather than to accumulate personal power or glory. The absence of traditional monarchical structures in Londor reflects their understanding that sustainable governance requires systems that support collective welfare rather than individual aggrandizement. The relationship between Londor's vision and the concept of stagnation reveals their understanding that the current cosmic order has become trapped in patterns that prevent genuine growth and development. The linking of the fire, rather than preserving what is valuable about existence, has created conditions where change becomes impossible, and both individuals and civilizations become locked into repetitive cycles that prevent evolutionary development. Their alternative approach seeks to create conditions where consciousness can continue to evolve and develop without being constrained by artificial limitations imposed by powers that benefit from maintaining existing hierarchies. The deep represents not an end state but a medium for continued growth and transformation that transcends current limitations while preserving everything valuable about consciousness and identity. As you rest in contemplation of this radical vision of what human existence might become when freed from the constraints that have historically limited its development, consider how the concepts of identity and consciousness that seem so fixed and permanent might actually be far more fluid and adaptable than conventional wisdom suggests. Londor teaches us that what we fear as loss of self might actually represent liberation into forms of existence that exceed our current capacity to imagine, that the dissolution of familiar boundaries might reveal possibilities for connection and understanding that transcend the limitations of individual perspective. The hollow Lord they seek to create represents not the destruction of humanity, but its elevation into forms of consciousness that preserve everything valuable about human nature while transcending the vulnerabilities and limitations that have previously constrained human potential. In the gentle darkness, where individual identity begins to merge with larger purposes, where the boundaries between self and other become permeable to deeper forms of connection and understanding, we can sense the presence of possibilities that exceed the narrow confines of personal ambition and fear, transformation that leads not to emptiness but to fullness beyond current comprehension. Throughout the long history of the world, from the earliest moments when the first flame blazed with such intensity that it banished the grey fog and gave birth to the concepts of light and heat, life and death, there has existed a figure whose presence at crucial moments suggests a nature that transcends the ordinary boundaries of mortality, time, and even identity itself. This enigmatic individual, known simply as Patches, appears across multiple ages and in multiple forms, his consistent characteristics and unmistakable personality suggesting that he represents something far more significant than a simple recurring character in the world's ongoing drama. The most compelling theory that has emerged from careful analysis of Patch's appearances throughout the Dark Souls series suggests that he exists as a cosmic constant, a being whose nature allows him to transcend the normal limitations that bind other entities to specific time periods, locations, or forms of existence. His presence serves functions that go far beyond mere comic relief or opportunistic merchant activity, operating instead as a teaching mechanism that challenges individuals to examine their own motivations and understand deeper truths about the nature of greed, trust, and moral development. Consider the evidence that supports this interpretation of Patches as something more than an ordinary opportunist seeking personal gain through deception and betrayal. His appearances span not just different locations within the same world, but different worlds entirely, suggesting that whatever force or nature governs his existence operates according to principles that transcend the normal boundaries, that separate distinct realities and time periods. The consistency of his personality across these multiple appearances reveals characteristics that seem designed to serve specific functions rather than emerging from simple character traits or personal history. His approach to each encounter follows patterns that suggest he understands something about human nature and moral development that allows him to craft situations that reveal hidden aspects of those he encounters. The traps and betrayals that Patches orchestrates are never random acts of malice, but carefully constructed scenarios that force his victims to confront their own assumptions about trust, greed, and the relationship between risk and reward. His method involves identifying the specific vulnerabilities and character flaws that prevent individuals from achieving their full potential, then creating circumstances that bring these limitations into sharp focus through direct experience rather than abstract instruction. The treasure that serves as bait for his various schemes always represents something that his targets desire but do not actually need. Material goods or advantages that appeal to surface-level wants rather than genuine requirements for growth or survival. This pattern suggests that Patches understands the difference between authentic needs and artificial desires, using the latter as tools for teaching lessons about the former. The locations where Patches chooses to establish his operations reveal his sophisticated understanding of human psychology and the environmental factors that influence moral decision-making. He positions himself in places where individuals are likely to be stressed, desperate, or otherwise psychologically vulnerable, creating conditions where their true character emerges from beneath whatever civilized veneer they normally maintain. The timing of his interventions corresponds closely with moments when his targets face crucial decisions about their own moral development and life direction. His traps often occur precisely when individuals need to learn specific lessons about humility, caution, or the dangers of allowing greed to override better judgment, as if he possesses some form of cosmic awareness that allows him to identify optimal teaching moments. The survival skills that allow Patches to thrive in the dangerous environments where he operates suggest capabilities that exceed what any ordinary merchant or opportunist should possess. His ability to establish secure bases of operation in areas infested with deadly monsters, his knowledge of safe passages through treacherous terrain, and his capacity to acquire rare and valuable goods all point to resources and abilities that transcend normal human limitations. The equipment that Patches carries and sells reveals connections to sources of supply that should be impossible for someone of his apparent status and background to access. His inventory often includes items that require specialized knowledge to use effectively, or that carry historical significance far beyond their apparent material value, suggesting that he serves as a conduit for distributing important resources to those who can benefit from them. The relationships that Patches maintains with other recurring characters throughout the series demonstrate his ability to navigate complex social and political situations without becoming permanently aligned with any particular faction or ideology. He maintains his independence and freedom of action while providing services that benefit multiple different groups, suggesting that his ultimate loyalties lie with principles rather than persons or organizations. The trickster archetype that Patches embodies appears in mythologies and folklore across countless cultures throughout human history, always serving similar functions as a teacher who uses unconventional methods to impart wisdom about human nature and moral development. This universality suggests that the role Patches plays serves fundamental needs in human consciousness and development that transcend cultural and temporal boundaries. The lessons that emerge from encounters with Patches typically involve understanding the difference between authentic confidence and dangerous overconfidence, learning to evaluate risks more accurately rather than being blinded by potential rewards, and developing the humility necessary to acknowledge personal limitations and learn from mistakes rather than simply avoiding responsibility for poor decisions. The mercy that Patches often shows to those who have learned from their encounters with him reveals that his ultimate purpose involves education rather than punishment, growth rather than suffering. Those who demonstrate that they have internalized the lessons his tricks were designed to teach often find him willing to provide genuine assistance and valuable resources, suggesting that his entire approach serves rehabilitative rather than purely predatory purposes. The persistence with which Patches continues his work across multiple worlds and time periods demonstrates a dedication to his chosen role that transcends personal benefit or simple survival instincts. His commitment to teaching these particular lessons suggests that he serves purposes larger than individual self-interest, functioning as an agent of forces that seek to promote human moral development on a cosmic scale. The specific nature of the greed that Patches targets in his victims reveals his understanding that certain forms of desire create psychological blindness that prevents individuals from perceiving dangers and opportunities accurately. His traps typically involve situations where excessive focus on material gain causes people to ignore obvious warning signs or to disregard their own better judgment. The forgiveness that Patches extends to those who survive his tests and demonstrate genuine learning from the experience shows that his apparent cruelty serves purposes that ultimately benefit his victims, rather than simply providing him with entertainment or profit. His willingness to help those who have proven their growth suggests that the entire elaborate process of betrayal and reconciliation serves developmental goals. The immortality or longevity that allows Patches to appear across multiple games and time periods raises questions about his fundamental nature that conventional explanations cannot adequately address. Whether he achieves this persistence through magical means, divine blessing, or some other mechanism, his continued presence suggests that whatever forces govern his existence consider his work essential enough to maintain across vast spans of time. The locations where Patches establishes his operations often become safer and more navigable after his presence has been established, suggesting that his activities serve protective as well as educational functions. His knowledge of local dangers and safe passages makes him a valuable resource for other travelers, even those who have reason to distrust his motives. The inventory management skills that Patches displays in maintaining his various shops and stashes demonstrate organizational abilities that exceed what most people can achieve, suggesting that he possesses either supernatural assistance or natural talents that have been refined through centuries of experience. His ability to remember and track countless items, prices, and customer relationships across multiple locations points to mental capabilities that transcend ordinary human limitations. The philosophical consistency that underlies Patch's various schemes reveals a coherent worldview about human nature and moral development that guides his actions across different contexts and situations. His approach remains recognizable despite changes in his physical form and operating environment, suggesting that he serves principles that transcend his individual personality or circumstances. The comic relief that Patches provides in otherwise grim and serious narratives serves important psychological functions for those who encounter his stories, offering moments of levity that prevent the weight of cosmic tragedy from becoming overwhelming while simultaneously delivering serious lessons about human nature and moral responsibility. As you rest in contemplation of this enigmatic figure whose presence spans worlds and ages, carrying with him lessons about the dangers of unchecked greed and the value of learning from uncomfortable experiences, consider how the trickster teachers in your own life may have served similar functions, using unconventional methods to help you develop wisdom and humility that conventional instruction could not provide. In the gentle laughter that emerges from recognizing our own folly, in the rueful acknowledgement of lessons learned through experience rather than theory, we can sense the presence of teaching forces that work through surprise and discomfort to promote growth that would be impossible through more comfortable methods. Patches reminds us that some of life's most valuable lessons come disguised as setbacks and betrayals, that true teachers sometimes wear the masks of enemies or fools, and that wisdom often emerges from the very experiences we would prefer to avoid. The cosmic constant that Patches represents whispers of the eternal presence of opportunities for growth and self-knowledge, teaching mechanisms that persist across time and space to ensure that consciousness continues to develop and evolve regardless of changing external circumstances. In the deepest chambers of the kiln of the first flame, where the boundaries between past and future collapse into an eternal present, and where the very air shimmers with the accumulated weight of countless sacrifices made across the ages, there stands a throne that has witnessed the most profound act of selflessness and the most devastating mistake in the history of the world. Here, in this place where time itself seems to hold its breath, Gwyn, Lord of Sunlight, made a choice that would define the nature of existence for millennia to come, a decision that has been celebrated as the ultimate heroic sacrifice, while simultaneously representing the fundamental violation of cosmic law that trapped the world in cycles of suffering and stagnation. The conventional understanding of Gwyn's linking of the first flame, carefully preserved in the histories written by his followers and maintained by those who benefit from the continued Age of Fire, presents this act as the pinnacle of noble self-sacrifice, a god willingly giving up his own existence to preserve the light and warmth that make civilization possible. According to this interpretation, Gwyn's choice represents the ultimate expression of love for his subjects and his world, a decision to endure any personal cost, rather than allow darkness to consume everything he had worked to build and protect. Yet there exists another interpretation of these events, one that emerges when we examine not just the immediate consequences of Gwyn's choice, but the long-term effects it has had on the fundamental nature of existence itself. This alternative understanding suggests that rather than being a heroic sacrifice made for the benefit of others, the linking of the fire represents a desperate and ultimately selfish act that has condemned countless generations to suffering in order to preserve a cosmic order that serves the interests of the gods rather than the well-being of creation. As a whole, consider the circumstances that led to Gwyn's fateful decision, the conditions that existed in the world when the first flame began to fade and the natural transition to an age of dark became inevitable. The fading of the fire was not a cosmic accident or external threat, but part of the natural cycle that had governed existence since the beginning of time itself. Just as day gives way to night and summer yields to winter, the Age of Fire was always meant to be temporary, a phase in the eternal dance between light and dark that gives meaning and structure to the flow of time. The gods who had risen to power during the Age of Fire had built their entire civilization, their sense of identity, and their claim to authority upon the assumption that their reign would continue indefinitely. The magnificent city of Anor Londo, with its impossible spires and divine inhabitants, represented not just architectural achievement but a statement about the permanent nature of divine rule, a declaration that the gods had transcended the cycles that governed lesser forms of existence. When the fire began to fade, and it became clear that the natural order would soon reassert itself, bringing an age of dark that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the world, Gwyn faced a choice that would define his legacy and determine the fate of countless future generations. He could accept the natural transition, allowing the cycle to proceed as it was meant to, and trusting that whatever emerged from the coming darkness would represent the next stage in the world's intended evolution. Alternatively, he could resist the natural order, finding some way to artificially extend the Age of Fire beyond its intended lifespan and preserve the conditions that had allowed divine civilization to flourish. The choice he made reveals fundamental truths about his character and motivations that transform our understanding of his supposed heroism into something far more complex and troubling. The act of linking the fire required Gwyn to sacrifice not just his life, but his very essence, feeding his soul into the flame to provide the fuel necessary to sustain it beyond its natural duration. This was not a momentary act of courage, but a commitment to eternal suffering, as his consciousness became bound to the flame itself, experiencing the constant pain of being consumed while simultaneously maintaining the artificial conditions that his sacrifice had created. Yet this personal cost pales in comparison to the suffering that Gwyn's decision inflicted upon the world itself. By preventing the natural transition to an age of dark, he created conditions where the fundamental forces that govern existence became trapped in patterns of artificial repetition, unable to evolve or develop according to their intended nature. The undead curse that began to manifest as the linked fire started to fade represents one of the most visible consequences of Gwyn's violation of natural law. This affliction emerged not as punishment for human sins, but as reality's attempt to cope with conditions that should not exist. Circumstances where the normal relationship between life and death had been fundamentally disrupted by artificial intervention in cosmic processes. The curse forced individuals to exist in states between life and death, unable to move forward in the natural progression that should have carried them into whatever forms of existence an age of dark would have made possible. Instead, they became trapped in cycles of death and resurrection that prevented any genuine resolution of their condition, condemned to repeat the same struggles indefinitely, without hope of natural progression or development. The Lords of Cinder, who followed Gwyn's example in subsequent ages, demonstrate the futility and ultimate corruption that inevitably result from attempts to maintain artificial cosmic conditions. Each individual who chose to link the fire discovered that the sacrifice demanded of them exceeded their capacity to maintain the artificial balance, leading to their eventual abandonment of their posts and the gradual degradation of the very system they had tried to preserve. Prince Lothric's refusal to fulfill his designated role as a Lord of Cinder represents a moment of clarity and courage that challenges the entire framework of assumptions upon which the linking cycle is based. His decision to reject the throne and allow the fire to fade naturally demonstrates an understanding that the continuing cycle has become more destructive than beneficial, that preserving the current order requires costs that exceed any possible benefits it might provide. The Aldrich, who consumed gods and humans alike in his visions of the deep, represents another form of response to the unsustainable conditions created by the artificial extension of the Age of Fire. His transformation into something that transcends the traditional categories of existence suggests that when natural development is prevented through artificial means, consciousness itself begins to seek alternative paths toward the evolution that has been denied. The Abyss Watchers, who chose to take darkness into themselves rather than simply opposing it, represent yet another attempt to find balance in a world where the natural relationship between light and dark has been fundamentally disrupted. Their collective identity and shared purpose demonstrate possibilities for transcending individual limitations that might have emerged naturally during a genuine age of dark. The Yorm, who discovered that his sacrifice had failed to benefit those he sought to protect, illustrates the fundamental flaw in the logic underlying the linking cycle. Despite his genuine desire to help his people and his willingness to endure any personal cost to achieve that goal, the artificial nature of the system he was trying to maintain meant that his sacrifice could not produce the lasting benefits he intended. The various endings available to the player character in the third game represent different approaches to resolving the crisis created by centuries of artificial intervention in natural cosmic processes. The traditional ending of linking the fire perpetuates the cycle for another generation but fails to address the fundamental problems that make such repetition necessary in the first place. The ending where the player character walks away from the throne and allows the fire to fade represents a return to natural law, permitting the transition to an age of dark that has been artificially prevented for so long. This choice requires courage to face the unknown rather than clinging to familiar but unsustainable conditions. Wisdom to trust that natural processes serve purposes greater than immediate human understanding. The usurpation of fire ending suggests possibilities that transcend the simple binary of fire and dark ages, representing humanity's potential to take control of cosmic forces rather than simply being subject to them. This alternative requires understanding that transcends the limited perspectives that have characterized both divine rule and natural submission. Wisdom that emerges from experience with both light and darkness. The Lord of Hollows ending points toward futures where the artificial distinctions that separate different forms of consciousness begin to break down, where individual identity becomes part of larger patterns of existence that preserve what is valuable about personal awareness, while transcending the limitations that prevent genuine collective development. The relationship between humanity and the dark soul becomes crucial when we consider alternatives to the endless repetition of the linking cycle. Humans carry within themselves fragments of the original dark soul, representing possibilities for forms of existence that do not depend upon artificial maintenance of cosmic conditions through repeated sacrifice and suffering. The natural development of human consciousness during an age of dark might have led to forms of civilization and awareness that transcend the hierarchical structures that characterize divine society, creating conditions where cooperation replaces domination and organic development replaces artificial control. The prevention of this natural evolution through the linking of the fire has denied humanity the opportunity to discover what they might become when freed from the constraints imposed by divine authority. The painted worlds that exist outside the normal cycle of fire and dark offer glimpses of what alternative forms of existence might look like when development is allowed to proceed according to principles other than the artificial. Maintenance of existing power structures. These realms demonstrate that consciousness can find fulfillment and meaning in contexts that operate according to different laws than those governing the primary universe. The deep that appears as a force in the later stages of the series suggests that when natural development is prevented for extended periods, reality itself begins to generate new possibilities that transcend the original categories that defined cosmic existence. This emergence of novel forms of being represents the universe's attempt to resume evolution and development, despite the artificial constraints that have been imposed upon it. As you rest in contemplation of these profound questions about the nature of heroism, sacrifice, and the relationship between individual choice and cosmic consequence, consider how the actions we take to preserve familiar conditions might sometimes prevent the natural development that could lead to forms of existence exceeding our current capacity to imagine their possibilities and value. In the gentle darkness that exists beyond the reach of artificial flames, in the quiet spaces where natural cycles can resume their intended rhythm without interference from fearful authorities seeking to preserve familiar but unsustainable conditions, we can sense the presence of possibilities that have been waiting patiently for the courage to release artificial constraints and trust in the wisdom of forces greater than individual understanding. The choice between linking the fire and allowing natural darkness whispers of deeper choices between control and trust, between preserving familiar suffering and embracing unknown transformation, between individual heroism and collective evolution, between the artificial maintenance of existing hierarchies and the organic development of consciousness toward forms of existence that honor both individual worth and universal development. Rest now in the knowledge that some forms of letting go represent not abandonment but the deepest form of service, that some apparent endings reveal themselves to be profound beginnings, and that the courage to release artificial certainties often opens pathways toward authentic fulfillment that exceeds every limitation imposed by fear of change and growth. And so we reach the end of our journey through the beautiful mysteries that surround the world of Dark Souls. These theories, woven from fragments of lore and the passionate imagination of countless fans, remind us that sometimes the questions are more beautiful than the answers. In the spaces between certainty, in the shadows cast by flickering flames, we find room for wonder and speculation. Whether the pygmy was one being or many, whether Solaire truly found his son, whether the painted worlds offer genuine escape, whether the abyss represents corruption or evolution, these mysteries invite us to engage not just with the game's explicit narrative, but with the deeper questions it raises about light and dark, choice and fate, the nature of existence itself. The theories we've explored tonight may never be confirmed or denied. They exist in that liminal space between story and interpretation, between what is and what might be. In that space, we find one of Dark Souls' greatest gifts, the invitation to think deeply, to question assumptions, to find meaning in ambiguity. Rest now in the comfort of mystery, knowing that some questions are worth asking even when answers remain elusive. The bonfire burns eternal, offering warmth in the dark, a constant in a world of uncertainty. Let these theories carry you gently towards sleep, each possibility a pathway into dreams. The mysteries will endure, patient as ancient stones, waiting for whenever you wish to return to them.